I don't know if you've seen in the news a couple of summers ago, Eddie Izzard ran a marathon a day for a month. I think he ran something like 43 marathons in 50 days. And Eddie Izzard is a comedian. He's not a runner, he's a non-runner. And if you see him and you watch him running around, you can see he's a non-runner. But he managed to do 43 marathons in a month. It was an incredible feat. What he wanted to prove was that anything was possible. Anything is possible. And the reason that most people don't excel in their life, the reason most people don't do more with their life, excuse me, is because they don't place a demand on themselves. And he got this idea from studying the Second World War. And he said during the Second World War, he said ordinary housewives, ordinary men and women did the most extraordinary things. Some of them became almost superhuman. You know, people that one day were just doing normal menial jobs or just working at, living as a housewife, were suddenly driving tanks, driving ambulances, saving people's lives, inventing the most, audacious instruments, to break codes, and even the Land Rover I think was developed in 40 days. Normally takes about 5 years to develop a new vehicle. But because demand was placed on people, because a time limit was placed and the caveat was placed there, suddenly people were creating the most extraordinary things. It's almost like they let go of their own limitations and started to live within this caveat of war, started to live freely and started to become more spontaneous, started to do the most outstanding things. And he said it's just the need to place a demand on ourselves. We need to place a greater demand on ourselves so that we do better, bigger, broader things. Most people are afraid to be uncomfortable, but if somebody else places the demand on us, and that's what the war effort was. It was a universal demand placed upon the country, saying we must come together with this, we must come together and fight this evil. People suddenly started to learn things very quickly. Things that would normally take years and years to learn, they learned very quickly. And people started to really explore their potential and to really let go of the egoic stuff and just be spontaneous livers. What excited me about what Eddie Izzard was saying wasn't just that he was saying, wasn't it great, these people created great things because the demand was placed upon them. He said, I'm going to go out and show you that can be true, that can be done. He said, I'm going to run 43 marathons in 1 month. And he also said, I'm going to go to France. I'm going to go to France and I'm going to do a stand-up in French. And I don't know French. He said, I'm going to learn French and I'm going to go out there and do a stand-up routine in French. And then I'm going to learn German. And I'm going to go out and do it in German. I think he was talking about doing it in some other languages as well. So what he did was he set up the gig, even though he couldn't speak the language, and he gave himself a certain amount of time to learn the language. And by placing that demand on himself, he learnt French fluently enough to go out and do this stand-up, and he learnt German and did exactly the same thing. He also decided that he was going to become a Hollywood actor. And he said, if I'm in Hollywood, let's peak, I'm out there and I'm noticed, he said, everything else will be affected. So he said, instead of like trying to build myself up from local theatre to, to kind of regional theatre to kind of like London theatre to national theatre to world theatre, he said, I'm just going to go straight to the top. And he said, and when I'm at the top, everybody below that will see me. He just made himself very visible. He made himself a city on a hill. That takes a lot of courage, but he did it. He ended up doing it. So suddenly Eddie Izzard has no problem filling his gigs because people have seen him in Hollywood films. He's visible. He's planted seeds everywhere in the world at the same time. And this is the concept I had myself when I wrote Watch My Back. I was still working as a nightclub bouncer, but I decided I was going to get myself onto talk shows and radio shows and in newspapers and talk about my book. And I ended up on national talk shows with Hollywood superstars. I ended up on Sky News Live in front of 20 million people. I ended up in national newspapers and broadsheets, Britain's most unlikely guru, because I knew I could do it. I placed a demand on myself to I got the book out there, placed a demand on myself to sell it. Exactly the same as when I did the omnibus version of Watch My Back. I printed 10,000 copies, I had a £20,000 bill. I had to sell it. I had a big bill coming, so I set up a 32 city tour, did 64 shops, and I hit the advertisers from every single possible angle, so that, not that I couldn't fail, because that's always a possibility, but that it wouldn't be for the want of trying. So by placing the demand on myself and by being comfortable with the concept of discomfort, I created something very big. And this is what Eddie Izzard is saying in this area here. Where are we not placing the demands on ourselves? You know. So, for instance, if you want to write a script, it's no good, you know, writing a weekend script and hoping that Hollywood's going to call. You know, we need to find time every day to perfect our skill, to perfect our art, to be great conduits for this work. You know, that means, maybe that means placing the demand on ourselves and saying, oh, I'm going to get a great script written for Ray Winston or for you know, Guy Pearce. I'm going to get it written by the end of the month. I've got to start sitting down every day. I've got to get up at 5 before I go to work. You know, I'm going to have an hour in my dinner break at work. You know, I'm going to have 2 hours when I get home instead of watching television or instead of going to the pub. We create a demand. We place a demand on ourselves, and we create the goods from that. We have the time, we have the hours, we have the facility, it's all there. People are saying all the time that some people have got more than others, and I can see why people say that, but actually in actual fact it's not true. Everybody has access to the same, you know, to the same amount of energy. Everything we create in the physical world comes from energy. The only thing people don't have is the skills, and sometimes they don't have access to the skills, or they think they don't have access to the skills, but the internet these days accesses us to everything. And if we haven't got access to the internet, that's because, you know, somebody hasn't shown us how to access the internet, or someone hasn't shown us that it is possible. Everything is possible. So as a teacher, that's what I try to do. I try to put my books across the world, my articles across the world, put the talks across the world, to try and inform people that this is available to them as well. And most of the information in the world, even though sometimes we have an exchange of money for information, most of the information in the world is just free. It's there. We can access it whenever we want. So coming back to this concept with Eddie Izzard, it's about placing the demand on ourselves, placing a greater demand on ourselves. And if we place a greater demand on ourselves, you know, some years ago, this place I'm living in now, I'm living in this very beautiful big house. I was working my business from a very small house in Longford, Coventry, and we were sitting on books. We had no room at all. So I bought this bigger place to expand myself and expand the business, and took myself right out of my comfort zone. Right out of my comfort zone. It felt very difficult. It felt like a real stretch. Of course, looking back now, I'm looking at where we are now, and you know, compared to what I'm doing now, that feels easy. That feels really easy. At the time, it was a tremendous stretch. I remember Sharon really wobbling and saying, "This, what if we don't make the mortgage?" And I said to Sharon, "Well, when we was in that bedsit, me and Sharon used to live in a bedsit. I said we were blissfully happy." And I said, "So if we ended up back there again, I could be happy there again." And she said, "Yeah, I could as well." So we took this place on, and we expanded into it, and the demand it created was tremendous. I had, at the time, I was selling 11 books, I think. We bought this place, placed a greater demand on ourselves, and within 3 years I went from 11 products to 32 products, books, DVDs, and I was travelling all around the world teaching. So the demand was uncomfortable, but the demand created massively. And sometimes the reason I do these kind of talks now, although this is on a website and this is a subscription thing, the reason I do it is to remind myself that you won't get growth without discomfort. You will not get growth without placing more demand. If you want stronger muscles, you put more weights on the bar, or you place more demand in, you know, the strictness of the exercise. But if we want more, if we want growth, we need discomfort. If we want discomfort and growth, then we need to know why we're uncomfortable. We need to have a purpose for that all the time. So part of the reason I'm sitting here doing this is because I want to spread this word around and teach people and pass on this message. But but also I want to place more demand on myself. So the demand now is for me to be in here every day and to do these talks to video, and that's a real discipline. It means I've got to be here, I've got to do it, and of course I love doing it anyway, but it is, you know, sometimes there's lots of things I could be doing instead of this. I could be at Costa having a coffee. I could be walking around Combe Abbey skiving. You know, I could be in the garden pretending to contemplate and be an artist. So I like the fact that if you want growth, you need discomfort. You need the demand placing on you. And of course, the moment you place that demand on yourself, we know what's going to happen. You're going to have to find purpose, because when it's really uncomfortable, the first thing you do is you say to yourself, why am I doing this? Why is this happening? Why am I so uncomfortable? And then you'll have to find the reason. And when you find the purpose, you find more power, you find more energy. It also is very good for you, because it forces you to become more metaphysical. When things become very physically demanding and very hard, sometimes we cannot get the support in the material world that we need, and we have to go outside of the material world. We have to look for invisible means of support. So we start to find God, or we start to find Logos, or we start to find the Akashic, or we start to find a higher consciousness or a higher self. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but we start to find invisible support, and that is there unequivocally, without doubt. That is there. Most people don't reach for it. Most people don't look for it because they're never uncomfortable enough. They say that only the drowning man will see Jesus. Only the drowning man will see God. There are no atheists in the foxhole. When we are in difficult places, we will reach out and find invisible support. This is one of the great things from Viktor Frankl's story. Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz, the concentration camp. He was in one camp during the Second World War, and his wife was in another camp, and it was hell. It was like the ninth circle of the inferno. And Frankl said there was death and deprivation and murder all around him every single day. You know, he was watching walking skeletons. He said the only solace he had was that he was carrying one page of the Torah around with him every single day. And every single day he would take this out of his pocket and read it. And the Torah is from the Mosaic texts, from the 5 books of Moses. And the 5 books of Moses are commonly known as the Torah. And the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So if you go into the Old Testament and you see Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the first 5 books, that's the Torah. Well, Frankl had one page of the Torah, so every day. And the Torah, by the way, is seen as being the blueprint of the universe. It's all about how to live in the world. If you look below the obvious stuff, you know, there's lots of people who are critical of the Bible, but if you look below the surface, it's all about finding absolution. It's all about getting rid of shadows. And it's all about cultivating powerful imagination, which I love. So Frankl's got this book, he's got this page of this book, and he's reading it every single day. And then his clothes get taken off him, and he's given prison clothes. And he ends up, when they take the clothes off him, he loses his page of the Torah, and he feels a bit devastated by this. And in his prayers, he's speaking to God, and God says to him, "We don't want you to read the Torah anymore." And the Torah in Old Greek means the word of God, the word from the universe. He said, "We don't want you to read the Torah anymore. We don't want you to read the word. We want you to be the Torah. We want you to be the word." In other words, we want you to put this into practice. We want you to make it work. We want you to make this metaphysical work. We want you to create a heaven even in this hell. Because if you can do it here and prove it works in this place, then people will know all around the world that it can work anywhere, and it will work anywhere. So Frankl started to practice what he'd read. He started to cultivate his imagination. He started to have metaphysical conversations with his wife, who he didn't realise was dead. She was in another camp, but she died. But he said his wife in these conversations was as real as me and you. He had conversations with his wife, and he said it was like the universe conspired to keep him alive, because his purpose, his overpowering purpose was, I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to write about it, and I'm going to teach people about the deprivation of this place and the dangers of evil, and I'm going to show them that evil can be overcome by connecting to Logos, by connecting to God, by using powerful imagination. So he had this very powerful purpose, and he said it was like the universe conspired to keep him alive, and he missed death by several seconds on lots of occasions. There was some occasions where he was supposed to go with a work party to dig holes, and at the last minute a guard had put him away and get him to do something else, and all the people on the work party were shot and killed, they were all assassinated. This happened to him lots of times, and he said he never lost hope. He said he was in this place, but he was not of this place, and he watched how people deteriorated and died all around him because he couldn't connect to purpose. He couldn't connect to Logos. He said, but because he could, he was able to stay alive, and he was able to stay above the deprivation. And Frankl went on to develop logotherapy. This is about finding purpose, and he went on to become a platform speaker all around the world. He was a revered speaker. In fact, he was a revered human being, and what he left us was very powerful, and it's more powerful than what most people realise, because what he left us was this message that we can create a hell out of heaven, and we can create a heaven out of hell. So we're saying the Germans or these particular soldiers, these particular people in the prisoner of war camp had created, from the world they'd created a hell with their thinking, with their negative imagination. But he said you can also reverse that and create a heaven from that hell. And this is something that the poet Milton said, our mind is its own place. It can create a heaven out of hell, it can create a hell out of heaven. So the idea is that we cultivate our imagination, we cultivate our seeing, we become seers, we go out there and we create wonderful things with our seeing. That's something that's open to us all the time. So I love the concept, again, going back to Eddie Izzard, that if we place the demand on ourselves, if the demand is placed, we find the hidden secrets. So the hidden secrets are hidden in plain sight. They're just behind the discomfort. But we don't go to the discomfort. When we get discomfort, we turn away from it, we look for comfort. So this is trying to encourage you to move towards discomfort. Embrace yourself. Embrace discomfort. You know, court discomfort. Rumi, the poet Rumi, called it night travelling. He said, go out into the night and hunt down your fears, because all the gold, all the bounty is hidden in those fearful places. We create from the fertile soil of discomfort. We need to make sure we know why we're there, though. So that's just something to think about. If you're not getting enough from your life at the moment, maybe you're haven't connected to purpose, and maybe you're just not placing quite enough demand on yourself, or maybe you're placing demand on yourself but you've lost the purpose for that, and that's why you're in pain. Or maybe you're placing the demand on yourself in an area that's not a natural bias. Maybe you're placing the demands on yourself in an area that's not meant for you. Like when I was working as a nightclub doorman, I had a lot of growth, but the growth only stopped when I realised that I was placing demand on myself in an area that wasn't naturally suited to me. I'm not a violent person, and that world didn't suit me. So I reversed it, and I started to put the demand on myself in areas where I did feel good, in areas where I felt I could serve, in creative areas, in anabolic areas, in areas that I loved. So I started to find my natural bias and place the demand on myself in that place instead. So again, you know, have a good think about that, and recognise that it is all possible. And you know, the alpha and omega of any success starts and ends with you. It is you. You have access to all of it.